Imagine a world torn apart by war, a nation humiliated, and a man rising from the ashes of defeat with a burning desire for power. This is the story of Adolf Hitler, and how he climbed to the top, turning Germany into a force that would shake the world. Buckle up, because we're diving into one of the darkest chapters of history, a tale of betrayal, economic ruin, and a hunger for control that led to unimaginable horrors. Let's go back to the early 20th century and uncover how a defeated Germany became the stage for Hitler's terrifying rise. It all begins in 1918, after 4 long, brutal years of what was then called the Great War, later known as World War I. The German Empire surrendered to the Allied forces. These forces included powerful nations like Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Canada, Japan, and the United States. Germany's leader, Kaiser Wilhelm II, was forced to step down from his throne and flee to Holland. Many Germans felt they hadn't truly lost the war on the battlefield. Instead, they believed their own leaders had betrayed them, stabbing them in the back. Among those who felt this bitter sting of defeat was a young soldier named Adolf Hitler, having been rejected from art school before the war. Hitler had served on the front lines for most of the conflict, witnessing the devastation firsthand. Germany's loss in World War I didn't just mean military defeat. It shattered the country's monarchy. A new government was formed under Chancellor Friedrich Ebert, and what became known as the Weimar Republic, or Weimar Germany, was born. Across the ocean, the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, had a vision for peace. He wanted to create a treaty that would prevent another catastrophic war. On the 28th of June 1919, Wilson sat down with Britain's David Lloyd George and France's Georges Clemenceau at the Palace of Versailles in France. Together, these 3 leaders crafted what became known as the Treaty of Versailles. Before we dive into the details of this treaty, let's understand what each of these men wanted. Woodrow Wilson believed that punishing Germany too harshly would only breed resentment and lead to another conflict. Clemenceau wanted justice for his people's suffering. The Treaty of Versailles, the agreement they reached, was harsh on Germany. It limited their army to just 100,000 men, their navy to only 6 battleships, and banned them from having submarines, tanks, or an air force. The Rhineland, a German region bordering France, was demilitarized to ensure France's safety. Germany was forced to give up 13% of its land, and was forbidden from uniting with Austria, a close ally. Years later, Hitler would use this resentment as fuel, reminding Germans of how the world had turned against them. Scheidemann lasted only 127 days before Gustav Bauer took over. This pattern of rapid change continued, and between 1918 and 1933, Weimar Germany saw 16 different chancellors. The Weimar government was trapped. They didn't have the money to meet workers' demands, nor did they have the people's trust to enforce order. But this backfired horribly. As more money flooded the system, its value plummeted, and prices skyrocketed. Honest, hard-working Germans saw their savings vanish overnight as inflation soared, sometimes reaching hundreds of % each month. Things got so bad that stories emerged of people carrying wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy bread. And here's a shocking detail. Thieves would dump the money out of the wheelbarrow and steal the wheelbarrow itself because the money was worth so little. This economic disaster, known as hyperinflation, crushed the spirit of the German people. Desperate for solutions, many turned to extreme politicians who promised radical change. The Weimar Republic seemed incapable of providing security or stability. Among these rising voices was Adolf Hitler, a man who had discovered his talent for public speaking in 1919. By 1923, Hitler had gathered a following of 55,000 members in a small political group he had joined as its 55th member. Originally called the German Workers' Party, Hitler took over as leader and renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party for short. At first, Hitler spoke on street corners and in beer halls, spreading his right-wing ideas. Though his party was still small compared to other right-wing groups in Germany, his influence was growing. In late 1922, an Italian politician named Benito Mussolini inspired Hitler. Mussolini had marched on Rome with over 30,000 men and seized power in Italy. Hitler wanted to do something similar, but he lacked the numbers to take over Berlin, Germany's capital. Instead, he set his sights on Munich, the capital of the German state of Bavaria. On the 8th of November 1923, what became known as the Munich Putsch, or Beer Hall Putsch, unfolded. Hitler's plan was to disrupt a meeting of Bavarian leaders, including the state commissioner and the head of the Bavarian army. He aimed to use the hyperinflation crisis to rally support for the Nazi Party, take control of Bavaria by force, and then pressure Berlin to hand over power of all of Germany. This was a risky gamble. Hitler relied heavily on other right-wing Bavarian politicians to back him. When they didn't, his 2,000 men couldn't overpower the state. The attempt failed, and Hitler fled. 2 days later, he was arrested. On the 24th of February, 1924, he faced trial for treason, a crime punishable by death. But the judge sympathized with Hitler and his cause, sentencing him to only 5 years in prison. He served just 9 months. While behind bars, Hitler wrote a book titled Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle in German. In it, he outlined his political beliefs, his vision for a powerful Germany, and his deep hatred for Jews and communists. He blamed them for Germany's woes, especially accusing Jewish people of profiting from the war while Germany suffered. Hitler didn't invent anti-Semitism, but he weaponized it, giving his followers a scapegoat to unite against. Released from prison on the 20th of December, 1924, Hitler was banned from public speaking until 1927. During this time, Germany started to recover. From 1924 to 1929, the Weimar Republic entered what's often called its golden years. In 1923, a politician named Gustav Stresemann had formed a coalition government, where multiple parties shared power based on the votes they received. Though he had briefly been chancellor before stepping down due to lack of support, Stresemann became Germany's foreign minister. In this role, he secured loans from the United States to rebuild the economy and introduced a new currency, the Rentenmark, to tackle hyperinflation. Oh no, based UNT. These moves worked wonders. Factories reopened, jobs returned, and the economy bounced back quickly. People's trust in the Weimar Republic grew, even though the government itself remained politically unstable. During these better times, extreme parties like the Nazis and Communists struggled in elections. In 1928, the Nazi Party won less than 3% of the seats in the Reichstag, Germany's parliament building. But not everything was perfect. The Treaty of Versailles still hung over Germany like a dark cloud, its harsh terms unchanged. The land Germany lost after World War I was permanently gone, confirmed by international agreements like the Locarno Pact. Many German military leaders and politicians remained skeptical of the Weimar Republic, the country's first attempt at democracy. And sadly, the golden years wouldn't last. If Germany had continued to prosper, perhaps World War II could have been avoided. But in October of 1929, disaster struck. The United States stock market crashed in an event known as the Wall Street Crash. It sent the American economy into a tailspin, and since Germany relied on American loans arranged by Stresemann, their recovery collapsed overnight. Germany suffered more than any other nation, plunging into a deep economic depression. This was Hitler's moment. The Weimar government had failed spectacularly for the second time in just 6 years. Germans were fed up, tired of hardship and uncertainty. Desperate times called for desperate measures, and extreme parties on both the right and left, like the Nazis and Communists, gained traction again. But the Communist Party was plagued by internal arguments, unable to unite behind a clear leader or goal. The Nazis, on the other hand, grew stronger. By 1931, they had a massive following. Hitler was now aiming to become chancellor through democratic elections, which were still held under the Weimar system. In 1932, the Nazis became the largest party in the Reichstag, winning 214 out of 608 seats, as life for ordinary Germans remained tough. However, in the presidential election that year, Hitler lost to Paul von Hindenburg, earning 36% of the vote to Hindenburg's 53%. Then, in 1933, political advisors and business leaders pressured Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as chancellor, despite Hindenburg's personal dislike for him. They thought they could use Hitler's popularity and policies to achieve their own goals, particularly to crush communism, which many wealthy businessmen despised. Hindenburg believed he could control Hitler by giving in to this pressure. He was wrong. Once appointed Chancellor of Weimar Germany, Hitler moved quickly to secure his power. At this time, many Nazi supporters formed paramilitary groups, essentially illegal citizen armies, and these groups often clashed violently with protesters in the streets. Hitler exploited this chaos, warning that a communist uprising was coming and positioning himself as the only one who could restore order. On the 27th of February 1933, a pivotal event occurred. The Reichstag, Germany's parliament building, was set on fire. Hitler seized the opportunity, blaming communists for the attack and demanding emergency powers from Hindenburg. Many believe the Nazis themselves started the fire. Walter Gemp, head of the Berlin Fire Department at the time, later claimed there was a delay in notifying firefighters and that he was barred from using all available resources to fight the blaze. He was also prevented from sharing evidence of Nazi involvement with the press, and in 1937 he was arrested. 2 years later, he was found dead in his cell, likely strangled in a staged suicide. Hours after the fire, Nazi propaganda fueled fears of a communist revolution, and Hitler convinced Hindenburg to invoke Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution, granting him temporary dictatorial powers during a national emergency. With these powers, Hitler acted swiftly. The day after the fire, he arrested over 4,000 people, targeting political opponents. His main paramilitary group, the SA, launched a brutal campaign against anyone who stood in his way. After losing to Hindenburg earlier, Hitler had called for another election to strengthen his grip. In the 2 months before the fire, the Nazis ran an aggressive campaign. Now, with emergency powers and a supposed terrorist attack to pin on communists, Hitler held another election on the 5th of March, 1933. This time, the Nazis won just under 44% of the vote. Then, on the 23rd of March, Hitler proposed the Enabling Act in the Reichstag. If passed, it would allow him to make laws without the Reichstag's approval. The vote needed a 2/3 majority to pass. Using his emergency powers, Hitler banned left-wing parties from participating and had many left-wing supporters arrested and sent to Dachau concentration camp, which had opened just 3 days earlier. On the 24th of March, the vote passed with 444 in favor and 94 against. Hitler could now pass laws unchallenged. He also appointed Joseph Goebbels as propaganda minister on the 13th of March, amplifying Nazi messaging. Within the Nazi Party, two key groups emerged: the SA and the SS. The SA, formed in 1920, was the original paramilitary wing that supported Hitler during the Munich Putsch. The SS, created in 1925 after Hitler's release from prison, started as his personal bodyguards and later became the main force behind Nazi atrocities, including the Holocaust. With most of his rivals sidelined, Hitler grew wary of the SA, seeing them as a potential threat. Their leader, Ernst Röhm, had been with the party since its early days, but many SA members were more loyal to Röhm than to Hitler. On the 30th of June, 1934, Hitler launched a purge, known as the Night of the Long Knives. Paranoid about losing power, he had Röhm and other high-ranking SA leaders arrested. Many were executed without trial, and Rome was given the choice between execution and suicide. On the 1st of July, 1934, he was executed by 2 SS guards. Then, on the 2nd of August, 1934, Hindenburg died. Hitler still held his temporary dictatorial powers, set to last 4 years. With Hindenburg gone, no one could stop him. He held a vote asking Germans if they wanted him to take on the roles of both president and chancellor. Presidents were elected by the people, while chancellors were chosen by parliament. When the results came back with a questionable 89% in favor, Hitler declared himself Führer of Germany. The Weimar Republic was dead, replaced by Nazi Germany under his absolute rule. This new regime would go on to commit some of the worst crimes in history and ignite World War II, the deadliest conflict humanity has ever seen, claiming over 50 million lives. To grasp the scale of that loss, imagine filling Wembley Stadium in London 555 times with people. That's the staggering human cost of what began with one man's rise to power.